And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger with Planet.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside STS off. Bring in STS off. It's orange!
R45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? We don't need any more of these.
Well, look at that. We've got an intro now, which I think's quite apt because the story behind a Yikes You Bet Concur is actually STS-93, which we're many a weekend away from that one, but that is literally John Shannon at the Flight Control Center saying those words after the events of STS-93 that I won't spoil because that is going to be a fun Shuttle Sunday to say the least. That is a really eventful mission. So we'll get to that one in multiple weeks' time. For now, it's STS-28. This is the 30th shuttle mission. This is where the naming designations go all over the place. So we're on STS-28. It's not the 28th mission. That's how it works. We've got Jake Egan, as you can tell, producing the background. We've got a fancy intro now as well, which is not unlike a Shuttle Sunday. So that is really helpful to have. But we've also got Sawyer. Hello, Sawyer.
Hello, Chris. It is a great day to be back for Shuttle Sunday, and it is a great day for Columbia to return to Shuttle Sunday.
We're also joined by Jack. Hello, Jack.
How's it going? Excited to learn about STS-28.
Indeed, STS-28. So this one is a military mission. That's why the thumbnail is Columbia's military return. But let's bring up the patch, as we always like to do first. There's a patch. I love this patch. This is great. Also quite very American with the eagle flying, which is quite apt for this weekend. Happy Independence Day to any Americans out there. Yes, I can say that. That's completely fine. Even the English are fine with this. There's a long story behind that I won't go into today on Shuttle Sunday. But happy Independence Day. Let's talk about this patch, Sawyer. You like looking at the patches and finding little Easter eggs in these. Let's see what you think about this one.
All right. So for this one, I mean, it's not bad. It's pretty nice. There's only so much they can say on a patch like this, given the fact that it is a very classified mission. But per the official description, the insignia was designed by the crew, who said it portrays the pride of the American people have in their manned spaceflight program. Their words, not mine. It depicts America, the Eagle, guiding the space program, the space shuttle, safely home from an orbital mission. The view looks south on Baja, California, and the west coast of the United States as the space travelers re-enter the atmosphere. The hypersonic contrails created by the Eagle and shuttle represent the American flag. The crew called the simple boldness of the design symbolic of America's unfaltering commitment to leadership in the exploration and development of space.
I like that. There's a bit of pride. I don't mind that at all. A bit of pride in your speeches. None of this kind of fluffy apologetic stuff. I like that. It's very much it reminds me a lot around this period. I remember that July the 4th was also a very patriotic thing when they had 3 orbiters together at the same time. Do you remember that, Sawyer? They had 3 orbiters together at the same time. Do you remember that? I'm sure you do.
I do, yes, absolutely.
Absolutely amazing. And Ronald Reagan sang God Bless America to, I think it was Challenger flying overhead on the SCA. Columbia just landed and Enterprise was behind him. It was amazing.
Yeah, that was before Challenger had even flown its first flight, I believe.
Yeah, it really was. This is the crew. Let's talk about the crew, sorry, if we can.
Absolutely.
Really quick, Chris, I believe you did neglect to say at the start of the show that if anybody has any questions, they can @ NASA Spaceflight in chat. And we will see your questions pop up and maybe answer them. It's got to be a good question. No, we'll answer as many as we can. But I had to throw that in, Chris. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. I was too busy trying to remember to thank Jake Egan because I never thanked the producer. So
you also didn't introduce yourself, but that's okay.
Everyone needs to know what. No
everyone knows who you are. Everyone knows who you are, but no one knows this crew. So I'll shut up and we can talk about the crew.
Yes.
Yep. So this was a military crew, very appropriate for a Department of Defense mission here. You had three of the branches represented. You have Commander Brewster Shaw on his third flight. You've got Dick Richards, which yes, his full name is Richard Richards as the pilot.
Wow.
James James Addison was MS-1. David Leesma was MS-2, and Mark Brown was MS-3.
Another photograph here of the crew, but this time out of their military uniforms and into their flight suits, which is a really lovely photograph just showing the crew ahead of their mission. And again, not a lot was said about this one ahead of the mission for obvious reasons, but let's go through Columbia herself. She just returned. We mentioned this is Columbia's return, and people are thinking, what do you mean return? It's been a while since we mentioned Columbia on Shuttle Sunday for a very good reason, Sawyer.
Yeah, I believe it was 61C was the last one before this, so it was the final flight before Challenger. But they had done some upgrades to it before that flight and did a lot of upgrades in between. One thing you'll notice there, a lot of stuff is missing on the side of the orbiter because they, well, decided to finally bring it up to spec with the rest of the fleet. So gone are the white LSRI tiles, and instead they went back towards the thermal blanket again, which we've seen with all the other orbiters as a way to kind of speed up time between flights. They did upgrades to the main landing gear and to the braking system so that the brakes wouldn't have to be changed out after every single flight, which they previously had been for Columbia. One thing I never realized, and I can't believe I didn't realize this, was that for all of her first flights, Columbia's name was written on her payload bay doors. So if the payload bay doors were open, you couldn't see the name of the orbiter. So they actually moved it to the same spot that it was for Atlantis and Discovery at the time. So even with the doors open, you could still identify her. And of course, we had the Silts pod still remaining and black
Yeah.
tiled around on the tail.
Silts pod, let's go. I'm excited for that.
Back when it was still active, too.
This photograph reminds me of the transition retirement. It's called TNR at the end of the shuttle program, where they basically taken all the parts off the shuttles that they were going to do. Apart from Discovery, Discovery remained the vehicle of record, as they called it, where the parts were kept intact. So Discovery is the flagship at the time of retirement, of course, and was the vehicle of record. But the other orbiters, they had the Hermes engines, Hermes they're called, donated to the Orion program. They had MPS parts taken out and given to SLS. There was lots of cannibalizing of these orbiters, which was a shame. But this is where you see things like the Ford RCS. I'm going to zoom in on this one here. That's where the Ford RCS is, and they take that out as a unit. And I think they could transfer between, like the Hermes pods, they could transfer between the orbiters if they wanted to. But yeah, she was looking very sorry for herself there. Thankfully, the next photograph along is more like it. There we go. And we're talking about the name. Sawyer, there's Columbia on the side next to the flight deck. So there you can see Columbia painted on freshly after her return. And the Ford RCS is in here now. There's the crane, the sling. Now, Jack, I'm bringing you back in on this one because this is my infamous faux pas during your streaming of Endeavour at the California Science Museum because
Right.
the sling was there. The sling was there, and I was saying, there's no way that's the original sling from KSC. Why would they take it all the way across country? They could just build a new one, and it looked quite new. And it was, of course, the original sling. They just basically repainted it and made it look all nice and new, but that is the sling in question.
Yeah, that was such a cool stream for so many reasons. Like Garrett coming out and hanging out with us and seeing the hardware. Like they didn't just leave that sling in a warehouse somewhere. Like they refurbished it as well, and I think that's why it looked so shiny and new, Chris. Like they got it ready and in prime condition for its final lift. It's cool to see the hardware in these photos, sort of back in the day. I'll never get tired of it. Wow.
I wonder if
Yeah.
we'll see the crane again in the near future, which, if you don't know why, watch Twist. It explains it.
Oh, nice little twist pin there. I like that, yeah.
No. It's a good
Yeah.
it's a good plug, but oh no.
Yeah.
If you
High
know, you know.
Discovery. High Discovery. Anyway, Columbia.
This is the lift, and it gives you a sense of scale. These orbiters are not small. They are very large vehicles, but they're made to look small inside the VAB because the VAB is absolutely huge. And this is the transfer from the transfer aisle over into the high bay. You can see the external tank. In fact, I'll zoom in so you can see better. There's the external tank and SRBs all mated in the high bay. And then you've got the orbiter taking over the gap in the transfer aisle into the high bay itself for actual stacking. That is always a wonderful photograph. That is at the top of the height of the VAB, which I know there's sometimes not in latter years, but they allowed photographers to go in there along with the NASA photography, which is this is NASA photography. But this is a great one to show the black chines, Sawyer, on Columbia. That is the instant recognizability of Columbia compared to her sisters, because none of the other orbiters had this. Can you maybe enlighten people who may be new to Shuttle or maybe not seen previous streams why that was the case with Columbia?
I'm honestly trying to remember. I don't know why my brain just totally forgot why the chines were there.
I think it was to do with that they assumed, because the orbiter had not flown, none of the orbiters had flown, they assumed a lot of things they would need, such as the white external tank, was not just for cosmetic reasons, but also solar radiation, things like that. So they were concerned about things that they'd learned from. And I think that's where they applied the lessons learned from Columbia as the flagship of the time to the other orbiters.
I
I'm
think
sure
they
there's more other
expected
reasons as well.
like a higher heating there than they ended up
Yeah.
experiencing, so they didn't need that. Were the chines like RCC covered, like the leading edge of the wing, or I actually don't even know what material that was.
I think Sawyer's frantically searching documentation.
I have
But
my shuttle book out of reach. I'll have to look later.
This is
that
such a
is a
crazy photo, though. Like I feel the stress, however many decades later, of the crane operator
oh
in
yeah.
charge of lifting an orbiter over a stack. Like, just the guts that must take. Wow.
Let's move on to next. These will be slightly out of order, but these are all pre-launch photographs, so we can go through these at our pleasure. This is the suit-up room, and this shows where they pressurize the suits and checks. There's the machines behind which they use to pressurize them. Is this still the same room that I know the commercial astronauts used a different part because of the SpaceX commercial, but the actual crew launches, the crew NASA contracted launches, are they in the same room, Sawyer, where they suit up?
They absolutely are. That was the Apollo suit up room, then the shuttle suit up room, and they replaced the different couches and the chairs over the years, but same room.
Awesome. Now then, on to the launch site, which is crane watch time. Here we go. We do like to keep an eye on the
Hey,
crane. It's still there. There we
still
go.
there. Still at
Still
the
there.
top of the fixed service structure there.
For those who may be new to crane watch, the transition from the Apollo era, the fixed service structure, which was part of the mobile launcher for the Saturn Apollo missions, was kind of modified in parts, not all the way through from the start. So we are keeping on heritage hardware that remains there. Of course, things like the rotating service structure, which you see there on the left-hand side, that was obviously a new addition for Shuttle, and along with other parts as well. But we're getting there. We're moving through the era where they finally have the final configuration. Then they all obviously took it all down, apart from at 39A, where that structure, the fixed service structure, remains. It was modified slightly for SpaceX and given a nice paint job and made it look very nice, but it's still the same thing at 39A. It's still the same heritage hardware. So that is some history. I know Jared Isaacman makes a big point of that. Ahead of his first launch, he was saying, he felt the history because he went to the top and they did a documentary. I think it was a Netflix thing, wasn't it? Inspiration for
Yes, it was.
and he basically was talking about the feelings he got from being there, which I can fully understand.
Yeah, you'll notice actually when you see it on any of our live streams, Crew 11 will be the next one. When they go up there, they get off the elevator and then they do their phone call and then they have to walk up a bunch of steps to get to the crew access arm in the White Room. That's because it was set for the space shuttle level, but the entry for Crew Dragon is just a little bit higher. So rather than doing the actual, hey, let's redo everything, they're like, oh, we'll just add another level above it rather than changing all the elevator stuff. Also, the chines were just the white tiles painted with a thermal black paint.
So it was thermal. That's one thing. That's good.
Before we move on from this photo, I just want our viewers to take a moment. Yeah, thank you, Chris. You read my mind. Look at the person standing there right below the number 3 on the right-hand side. Like, look how tiny they are. They're
And
sitting there with a camera. We might even know who that is. But the point is that it really gives you a good sense of scale. That person there, and then there's another person on the actual mobile launch platform as well. Both of those just like human for scale images within this photo, I think are just really cool for people who might not have ever gotten to see a shuttle up close. Like, it really gives you a good sense.
There's a
Yeah.
crawler transporter.
They're big. Spoiler.
Yeah.
Thanks, sorry.
I'm glad I can provide insight.
But
There's
that
the
is
other.
Yeah, right
There's
by
the
the
other
right
person right
SRB.
there, but yeah, exactly, Slayer, by the right SRB.
Scroll down just
So
a touch,
cool.
Chris.
and we had crew walk out.
There is this. Yeah.
The Airstream Astrovan.
Oh, that aesthetic. Take me back.
There's the cake. The cake is still not a lie. We always make a point of that every time we do a Shuttle Sunday because there's always that photograph. That looks like a post-landing photograph, so let's move on. There's the crawler transporter again. A great photograph again because that is it departing. Obviously, it takes the orbiter out and the shuttle stack out on the mobile launcher. Mobile launch platform, they call them. Now, for SLS, they call mobile launchers, but for shuttle, it was mobile launch platform. So they're two different things, but that is a great photograph there showing a crawler transport, which is still working to this day. Two of them for SLS. They've been modified, obviously, during the stand down between shuttle and SLS, though. But there you can see Columbia in the background, looking very pretty.
What a beautiful machine.
Oh,
Now, Jack, T-38s.
Let's go.
What do they normally use? Were they made basically just for astronaut transportation, or have they got other roles in the military or something?
They're trainers. They're often used as trainers. Sometimes they're used as adversarial air, like they play the bad guys. Of course, everyone's seen Top Gun. What is it? What do they call it in Top Gun? A MiG-29 or something. But it's just a black painted T-38. But yeah, they're used as trainers. There's an actual like fighter variant that's the F5. There's several different variants of the T-38. But yeah, mostly a trainer. Astronauts use them a lot because it's got two engines and they're fairly acrobatic, and they're good for keeping your stick time current, and also good for transport. Also, they just look sweet. I mean, come on, like what a beautiful aircraft. They're not going to be around much longer because there is a new sort of service-wide trainer coming online. What is that, the T7 or something like that? I haven't been paying much attention because I think the T-38 is way more beautiful. But yeah, it's a cool plane. That's been your plane moment with Jack.
Got more photographs yet, so hold on to those thoughts.
But yeah, that was astronaut transport in a way. The astronauts could kind of basically ring up, get a plane, and fly out to the Cape or do some flying around Houston. But it's different from the shuttle landing trainer that they had. That was a modified Gulfstream jet, where one side was normal controls, the other side was they put in simulators of the space shuttle controls, and they basically flew with the engines in reverse and the rear landing gear down to simulate the drag and angle of attack of an actual shuttle during landing.
Yeah, you might be thinking, wait, jet engines in reverse, how does that work? Well, thrust reversers are a thing. Normally you use them while you're like landing to slow the plane down. Like some of the older planes, you can see the thrust reverser like deploy, and it just is a thing behind the jet engine that forces the thrust forward. And man, the idea of flying in a Gulfstream with the thrust reversers on in the air and the gear down and the flaps fully down, like in the draggiest possible configuration you could in order to simulate shuttle aerodynamics is one part terrifying to me and another part like, ooh, I want to try that. that sounds really fun. But it's like flying the plane in a way that's never meant to fly, but they got valuable training.
Flip this photograph up on here. We're going to take some questions. I do want to point out the people watching the recorded version of this, why they're asking questions from people randomly in the internet sphere. It's because we do this show live on Space Coast Live at 3 p.m. Eastern time, because we have to use the Florida time for the Space Coast Live, 3 p.m. Eastern. And we do it live on that channel. And basically that we record it and then we put it onto our channel. So if you're watching a recorded version, that's your opportunity to know if you do want to ask a burning question. You can type it in the comment section, to be fair, and we will read the comments. So by all means, ask it in the comment section. But while we're live, we can do it like a normal rap side, something like that. We can do an interactive show. And we do have questions. I want to thank Phil first. Phil did a gifted membership, so thank you, Phil. It's very rare because this is not the kind of standard big launch, pre-launch Starship show or anything like that. This is just a Shuttle Sunday. We took the opportunity to use our vast archive of shuttle content. We have a vast archive of shuttle content in L2 for starters. Ari Guest has also joined in with a gifted membership. Gives me a chance to say it straight away because I just saw it in the corner of my eye. But we have questions as well. Let's try and cover some of these questions. I'm going to give this one to Sawyer first. Severin asks, what do we think about Discovery being moved to Texas?
Oh
Well,
my
we're just starting with that one first.
Yeah,
We're
just
just,
Sawyer
we're
first.
just all right. Yep.
There was a contest, in a way, of where the orbiters would go. Each of the organizations had to put together a full presentation. They had to give the outlines of how they're going to display it, viewership numbers, what they would use for educational purposes, the buildings and facilities that they would use to keep them climate controlled, to keep them in the state that they are in. All of these different places put in their requests, basically. Of them, Space Center Houston's, having read them, basically said we should get it because we deserve it, rather than going through the effort of explaining all of the details of it. Uh, the Enterprise one was spectacular, hence why New York ended up getting a space shuttle. And I know that because I was part of the campaign to bring the space shuttle to New York City at the time, which is why I'm very well aware of all of the efforts that went in to get these orbiters to their final locations. The fact that someone now just wants to go ahead and say, oh, we're going to sign it into law that we're just going to move it from the Smithsonian where it's been for years and have to find the money, the infrastructure, and everything to figure out how are we going to move this thing. All of the shuttle carrier aircrafts are retired, including one of them at Space Center Houston. All of the materials that have been moved to lift and move all of these orbiters have been retired because they're all in their final homes. I think this is a terrible, terrible move, and they should have just gotten good when they put their first proposal in.
Sawyer, get off the fence and make it, give us your opinion.
I was
Jack?
so involved with where the shuttles went that I take this personal.
Yeah, I do have a question about SCAs coming after this. So we've got a nice little segue on this one. But Jack, your thoughts?
I mean, so many thoughts, Chris. I think I just echo what Sawyer said. He said it more diplomatically and better than I ever could. I didn't realize we were sore losers. Like, I'm sorry. Also, how? Just how? If you even saw how the shuttle was transported to Los Angeles on the SCA, and it was a big to do, and then they had to like plan for years how to move it through the streets of LA, and like. It's not a trivial thing to move an orbiter, let alone, as Sawyer said, a long time after all of this infrastructure is gone. And we were just talking about that single sling that was used to move the orbiter from horizontal into vertical for the California Science Center. Like, that's one example of one piece of hardware that would be required for this. And in a day and age when we're trying to cut waste, and we're cutting science, and we're cutting NASA's budget, like, how are we finding money to do something as frivolous as this? I obviously don't like it. I won't belabor the point, but there you go.
Yeah, I find the logistics of an issue. I'm scared that something historically important, such as shuttle discovery, could get damaged because it was a risky thing, even with the SCAs flying. There was two shuttle carrier aircraft, 905 and 911. And Mud Puppy asks, how many times did the shuttle return to the Cape atop of the 747? I don't know about that number, but I do know the SCA was used 66 times during the space shuttle program. I do know that number. But it is still a risk. Somebody did say in chat once, it was in the SBL chat, just because it'd come up in the news at the time, why not take the wings off and truck it across? At that point, they lost me at that very point of the conversation because that's where you're damaging a vehicle you don't need to damage. So yeah, I'm gonna put Mud Puppy's thing into the ticket, by the way, because we are covering the SCA part of that. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I wonder if there are caveats that allow them to say, I appreciate that being in the bill, but unfortunately we've evaluated it and the logistics do not allow for it. Let's use that money for maybe some fancy more additions to the exhibitions, which keeps everyone happy. I don't know.
Here's a crazy idea that might be slightly more plausible, maybe. Let's get a Starship in Houston. I mean, come on. How cool would that be? And it's Shuttle 2.0. Also, I do want to point out Ari Guest in chat saying they won't, but I'll accept it if they use a shuttle carrier aircraft to move it. That would be cool. It would never happen, though, because both of those aircrafts are required, and I do think it would require something like cutting the wings off, which is just a travesty. Anyway,
It
No,
is so cool, the SCAs. Sorry.
I'm going to utilize Jack's playing knowledge. Right, so the SCAs are retired. I mean,
yeah.
they are literally retired. I don't know if they've actually taken the engines out or anything like that. I don't know how retired they are, but how much of an effort is it to reservice an SCA 747, or could they just modify another 747? What would be easiest if you were given the task of doing it?
I mean, I'm not an aerospace engineer, so perhaps I'm not the best at answering this. I suspect that the most cost-effective thing to do would try and get like one of the existing ones back in service, but it would be, as RC Horseman in chat says, multi-millions to do it, and it might not even be possible. Like, a 747 isn't just one monolithic thing. There are many different models of 747. Like, there's one specific model. If you remember Sophia, Chris, the flying telescope, that was a 747 SP for special performance. And there was only so many of those made and only so many parts for those made. And it got to the point where one of the reasons why it was so cost ineffective to continue flying Sophia was because there was just no more 747 SPs or parts or people that knew how to maintain it. So I actually don't know what specific variant the SCA is of the 747. Maybe there's a bunch of freighters flying and they could scavenge parts, but I think suffice to say it would be a huge, huge effort, and I would be shocked. I would be shocked to see one of those aircraft that has just been sitting mothballed for decades at this point in the desert take to the air again. That would be borderline unprecedented, even for an aircraft out in like the Arizona boneyard where they specifically preserve things to be put back into service. Like, that is a thing the military does. It's called like, type 1000 or type 4000 storage. There's different levels of storage and readiness for getting these things back onto, back into service that the military does do for aircraft. These SCA weren't put in any sort of readiness, right? They were put and mothballed as museum pieces. So, there's my answer.
Important point there. It's a museum piece. You have people that it's set up as a museum exhibit. People can go inside the plane as part of the exhibit. They have one of the shuttle models that was originally at the Kennedy Space Center on top of it that you can go inside because it's an exhibit. It is not set up to fly. It is legitimately set up as an exhibit. You wouldn't fly it with all the museum little tags and explanations in it.
We'll come back to more questions because they're kind of related to on-orbit operations, which we'll get to. Let's go through some launch photographs because I've
One
been on
more
this
thing
one
with
for about 10
the
minutes.
One more thing with the shuttle carrier aircraft question that you had there. You talked about the 66. Not all of those were missions. You also had flights where they were taking it to and from Palmdale for the
Yeah.
upgrades like they did. Because I did see someone mention the word slide earlier in chat. One of the upgrades we didn't talk about was the post-Challenger upgrade that all of the previous flight, I believe it was, all of the ejection seats had been removed. The ejection seat panel had been removed. But this flight also added the new quote unquote safety features in that it had a little escape arm that you could attach a hook to and slide out from the mid bay after blowing the side hatch. Also, the side hatch now came equipped with an inflatable slide.
Oh.
So if for some reason they couldn't get out of the orbiter, there was now an inflatable slide.
I swear I'm going to move on to launch stuff right now because I've been stuck on that photograph for 10 minutes. So I'm going to start going through these photographs because they are beautiful. Look at this one here. I've zoomed in. I've zoomed in on this one, and that is zooming out. That is absolutely stunning. And that is actually, I didn't actually notice at the time. There's a crane watch. Finally, I realized I had some very little pad photographs in this one, but then I just noticed this one here. If you zoom in, you can see the crane still.
Nice artsy shot of the crane.
It is beautiful photographs, these though. Look at this. That's literally a second after launch. I mean, that is really, really nice.
Oh, I love those. And the bird.
Yeah, and there you can see the difference between the solids and the RS-25s. I daren't bring up the body boost. I daren't because we'll be on this photograph for another 10 minutes again. But these are the SRBs, literally the SRBs. This is the heritage of what you saw with this nozzle blow off. I do have to ask the question because the question was asked so many times. I've got a funny feeling people are just interested in this, Sawyer. What would have happened during first stage ascent if, like the body booster, the nozzle blew off one of the boosters? How bad is that?
Extremely bad. Like, bad day bad. It's you can't jettison them until they're done. So you're stuck riding him for the whole 2 minutes and 5 seconds ish on the way up. You could hope that it still has some performance on it, but that would be an issue. Also, you're talking about the cleanness of it. You could see right there, one of the exhaust is SRB dust, which if you touch it makes your fingers tingle. The other is water vapor, because that was hydrogen and oxygen coming out of those RS-25s. So one is
Yeah.
making water vapor, one will make your fingers tingle. Ask how I know.
And both would burn your hand off. There we go.
True.
So this is this is like, if there was Max Evans and Jack's probably and Sawyer probably the same as well, because I've noticed photographers, they'll take this photograph and I'll go, wow, that's amazing. They'll go, no, I'm not happy with it. There's a pixel out of place. I'm like, what? The exposure on this is. Have they done this on purpose, Jack? It looks like the exposure on purpose so they didn't get blown out by the SRBs.
Yeah, that is definitely a shot that's been exposed more for the SRB plume than like a daylight image of the shuttle itself. That's a really beautiful shot. You can see just how bright they are. That the everything else in broad daylight looks dim, and you can see even at this level of exposure, the plume is still mostly overexposed. Like there's a little bit of detail in there, more than if it was just that bright white that you normally see with like a standard exposure, but still, they're just so bright. You're competing with the brightness of those solids. It's a hard thing to do.
There we go. Look at this. This is an iconic shot that we've seen on a few missions where it's just into the roll program and they've got that angle, that arc almost, which is where the SRBs, ironically, the nozzles on the SRBs are steering the vehicle through the roll program. It's people go, how did he do that? Was it the wings? No. It was the TVC on the aft of the orbiter the boosters on the shuttle stack, which were literally steering the entire stack through it. And then once they departed on second stage, you had the TVC on the RS-25Ds.
Yeah,
I
in
was
videos, you'll
pausing.
see them do the gimbal test about a minute before launch where they wiggle them all, and then when it's done, it goes into the launch position, which is all the engines as far away from each other as possible, because otherwise they shake so much that they would rattle themselves into each other. So,
I was pausing there, sorry, because Wayne Hale, who we'd be discussing all the time during the shuttle, because he does his amazing blog on previous shuttle missions, he does not like them being called RS-25s. He says, no, when it was shuttle, it was SSMEs. We didn't call them RS-25s. There we go. That's why I paused there, but they are the RS-25Ds. That's what the engines were. Right. How about a video, boys and girls? Would you like to see a video of the actual launch itself? Because I think we do like to show videos on this one. Let me bring it up 1 second.
I like launch video.
yeah.
I like launch videos too. We've got 2 landing videos to show you as well afterwards, but I'm going to do the launch video first, then we'll go into the actual on-orbit photographs. We've got a few questions relating to that. That's where we'll take some more questions, but let's show. It's actually quite a long one. Not long, too long. It's 4 minutes long because it includes walkout and things like the beanie cap coming away, which you might not have seen in previous videos as well, and the actual launch itself. So here we go.
The crew moved from their astronaut quarters at the operations and checkout building to the Astrovan for the 20-minute ride out to Pad B. Also accompanied there by astronaut Michael Coates, who's been flying the shuttle training aircraft this morning, doing weather reconnaissance. About an 8-mile trip from the astronaut quarters out to Pad 39B, where the crew boards the orbiter. T-minus 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Ground supplies of hydrogen and oxygen for the orbiter fuel cells have been turned off. Columbia is now running on its onboard reactants. The orbiter test conductor has asked pilot Dick Richards to clear the caution and warning memory system. He reports that clearing is completed, and he reported no expected errors. T-minus 10. We have go for main engine start. 7, 6, go for main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff. Liftoff on Columbia, and it's return to flight.
This is Mission Control. Houston, roll program initiated. Good roll program confirmed for Columbia. 3 main engines up and running. Currently throttling down to 97% and throttling down now to 65% on the 3 main engines for the passage through maximum dynamic pressure. Altitude 18,000 feet, downrange about 1 nautical mile. Good throttles confirmed by the flight dynamics officer. Columbia has just been given the go at throttle up call by Mission Control. Altitude 62,000 feet. Downrange about 7 nautical miles. Three good APUs, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good main engines, current altitude 100,000 feet, downrange 13 nautical miles. Standing by for SRB separation, and we have SRB separation. Downrange 30 nautical miles now, 187,000 feet.
There we go. That was quite a clean video as well, because a lot of these historical shuttle videos, the launch videos, they tend to get quite corrupted from the time they were filmed to how they found themselves on the internet. But that one was quite a clean one, I must admit. Let's go back to that's a nice. Hang on, I'll go back a bit further. There we go. That's even better. Literally just ignition. You can see the twang as well. I'm going to replay this without the volume on. 1 second. I'm going to mute. I've got to remember to unmute when I go to the next video as well. Wait for the twang. Oh, hang on, I've got a bit too far on that. Let's go back for the twang. There, you can see the tail, the rudder speed brake as they called it, and then back to level, and that's when the SRBs kick in. It's a few seconds, but you can actually see it. And then when we did the flight readiness firings on previous shuttle missions, ahead of their debut flights, you could see, especially then, you could see the twang because they were literally still bolted down to the pad. Let's go on to the mission itself. Got lots of photographs here. I'm going to test Sawyer big time here. I should have given Sawyer a heads up on this one, but first of all, the crew. Yeah, so we got crew photographs. That's all fine. Lots of these. Again, surprisingly a large amount because this was a military mission. This was not something they publicized all that much, but we got quite a few photographs, including the payload, which really is amazing because at the time you would not be able to see it. So we got these lovely photographs here. Very happy people. Then we've got these 5 photographs, Sawyer. I could not for the life of me find out what the references were, but they go through looking at this bar in the payload bay. And I'm like, okay, why? And I wonder if Sawyer knows. I don't know.
Huh.
Let me see.
Is that fixture holding the payload canister things?
That's a camera.
Yeah, that's a camera. That's why I wonder if they're just panning around, having a look around, because basically just these photographs here, just panning around. And it was part of the collection as if it was important. So I have no idea. But again,
I'm trying to see, that's part towards the rear, towards the OMS pods.
Yeah.
Unless it's related to something after the deployment of the payloads, which again, even the deployment method of the payloads has been kept classified through this time. It's expected that it might have done the spin up like a frisbee before deploy. Some have said it may have been deployed vertically from there, but it didn't have there was no Canadarm on this flight, so
Huh.
it couldn't have been deployed by the Canadarm. So I wonder if it was something after payload deploy, which happened on flight day 1.
Yeah, you've seen those iconic videos of like the payload spinning up and then floating out of the shuttle bay. These satellites were supposed to have been built on the same bus as those, so a spin up and float out kind of thing. Yeah, it's a Garfield, Chris. What are you
Yeah,
doing?
I know. Yeah, it's Garfield. You beat me to it. I was going to say there's the aft end of Garfield. Oh, that's lovely. We do have a shot of the external tank as well after separation, which is a nice thing to see. It became a big deal in return to flight missions for obvious reasons. They wanted to get as much photography of the external tank as possible to see where they'd lost TPS during the ride uphill, because then it could track it to potential impacts on the orbiter's TPS itself. So that's why there was a big deal. But on this older mission, they took a nice photograph of it. They can see the burn marks from. Don't say anything, Sawyer, and don't say anything, Jack. Chat. What are the burn marks on the external tank? Let's make this interactive. Let's see if who'll be first to give the answer.
And if you think you know it, type it in the comments if you're watching the replay.
Yes. I give people a chance to catch it. When you ask a question, it takes people to hear the question come through the internet. Hasi Osman's first, and there's Supersonic Retro Propulsion joins in as well. It was exactly that. The SRBs, when they separated, as you saw in that video of the launch itself, they fire. They literally fire away from the external tank, and that's where the burn marks are. We got a lot of shuttle fans in here. Look at this. Look at the chat right now. Everyone's joining in. And they're basically, and no one's copying each other's answers because it just takes that long to type and answer it into chat, into live chat. Well done. Well done. Let's look at this, right? This is a diagram of the alleged satellite. Now, a lot of things were declassified. There was a massive declassification after, I think it was Richard Snowden did something naughty, but these are not those. These are actually just declassified, but it gives you a bit of insight into the payload that they were launching on this one. And it says here, CIA. So I wonder if that, sorry, did the CIA launch satellites? Is it literally a CIA satellite, do you reckon?
I mean, there was a lot of things that were released publicly in 1998, and all of this came out during that time. So originally, people thought that it was some kind of spy satellite that was actually going to be taking imagery, things like that. It turns out what had been predicted a couple weeks later, just based on the orbit, and what we now know is basically correct on this, was that it was part of the satellite data system network. So basically, spy planes would be able to take their photos, or you would have a photo from a satellite that's outside of normal communication ground station. It would relay it to the SDS satellite, and then that would send it back down to Earth to then be reviewed. So it's very likely that that's what this was. And it was so cool. In order to be able to get as much coverage area as possible of the Northern Hemisphere and to get Russia or Soviet Union at the time and all of that, they put it in such an eccentric orbit that it has a ridiculously high apogee and a ridiculously low perigee. If you look right there, 24,816 by 230. That is very
Wild.
eccentric. So you get, rather than geostationary transfer orbit. And yeah, 3 of them were launched on Shuttle, and the 4th one of the 2nd generation was launched on Titan 4.
I mean, it makes
Well,
sense
no,
to get that real-time communications from the satellite. If you don't have a ground station below you, but you still want imagery of the thing, you need a relay.
What was the thing I was pointing out? Look, Titan 4 as the alternative.
Mhm.
Amazing. But there we go. Right. So there's 1998. There's a reference to what Sawyer was talking about with the release. There's 1998. This is a satellite that they've basically drawn up here. The same person. That's what it looked like. It was no small item. That's why the shuttle was needed for this, because this is a big, big satellite. So that was really cool. We've got this was a test on re-entry, but I'm going to bring it up now because it was just part of the slits, because they could take look at the heating there on the wing leading edge. And of course, it's so sad because that obviously brings up reminders of what happened to Columbia in the end, and the fate of Columbia with the wing leading edge, the RCC panels
And
there.
it's the exact same wing, too.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, this is from the Silts pod. This is what the thermal imagery looked like. And actually, there was a really fun thing with this mission where, as it was re entering, apparently something splattered onto the windshield and stuck itself to it. So once it landed, they pointed it out. Someone scraped it off, put it in a coffee cup. This is all from an article in America Space. and they were going to take it off for analysis because it was still kind of liquidy. So they said, "Hey, what'd the analysis come back with?" And the guy's like, "You're never going to believe this." So it was put down somewhere. Someone thought it was a legit coffee cup, poured coffee in it, chugged it, and said that was the worst coffee I've ever had. So we never know
Photographs
what it
here.
was because they accidentally drank it.
Wow.
That's a nice photograph. The ohms pod there and the rudder speed brake. People say tail, that's fine, but it was actually called a rudder speed brake. That's what his actual name was. Crew photographs. Is he Garfield again?
A lot of Garfield.
A lot of Garfield butt, but yeah.
Lots of crew photographs there.
Peanut butter and jelly in space.
Sawyer, sports team, time, American sports teams. I assume
Uh,
that is one.
That's college. Yeah, that's a college
All right.
team.
There
That's
we go.
university, Mizzou.
That's nice. Now, there's RCS. Ford RCS we were mentioning earlier. I do want to get back to, let's see what's most apt. Let's do this one photograph of this question here, right? So the question is from Severin, who asks, if the payload bay door failed to open on an STS-300 type of mission, how insanely, I won't use that word, would they be? It seems quite risky to only have one docking port in the payload bay. So, don't you mean STS-400, Severin? Because STS-400 was where they would basically use another orbiter to go up and rescue the cube, but they would use the SRMS, I can't even say the word, which is a shuttle robotic manipulator system, or the shuttle arm, and they would latch onto each other via their arms. They would not dock inside a payload base. So the issue of not payload bay opening, though, that's a big deal because they need to open the payload bay doors, Sawyer, because that was how they had the radiators on the inside. That's how they would dissipate heat, and they used the flash evaporator system. That's it during the ride uphill when the payload bay doors were open.
Exactly. Yeah. If they did not open during any mission, that's an immediate return for an emergency landing. So those were mission critical.
Cool. Supersonic retro propulsion asks, since each of the orbiters are different masses, wasn't Columbia the heaviest? Question mark. Yes, she was. Did they have different mass to orbit capabilities? Yes, they did. Sawyer, maybe that's why Columbia didn't really get the ISS missions and things like that. It was all about capability. I think Columbia was better known in her later years as carrying likes of Space Hub for the experimental long duration missions before the ISS became really capable.
Exactly. Yeah. Besides the fact that it didn't have the docking port yet, adding that would have added so much more mass to it as well that they figured, oh, it's fine. I mean, ISS will be done in 2005, so we can worry about it later when it doesn't have to carry up pieces. Obviously, we know that finished later, but they're like, you know what? We'll just use it for other things. But it was much, much heavier, and in fact, it got a little bit lighter on this mission when they got rid of those white tiles and switched it out for thermal blanket.
Very good. I have a bunch of landing photographs to show you all, which I'm sure you'll be very happy about because the landing photographs are always very, very picturesque.
Can I
But
talk
we've
about
also got
one more payload before we go to the
sure.
landing? One of the ones, I don't know if we have photos of it, but it was called DSO 469, which is the Detailed Secondary Objective. It was a human skull.
I was
So-
hoping you would bring this up.
Yes, we had the crane earlier. Now we have the crane Basically, it was a 11-pound skull of a woman that was brought up, a real skull. It had a plastic matrix that was meant to be like flesh, and hundreds of thermoluminescent dosimeters, basically to check how much radiation they would get. And they did it on 3 different flights so that they could see all of the different radiation levels at different inclinations and different orbits. And yeah, they basically had a human head skull in space to test for radiation, and it actually led to a lot of fun on future missions. If you've ever read Mike Mullane's book, Riding Rockets, which is hysterical, he played a lot of pranks with it. Needless to say, there was a sleeping bag that was stuffed with clothes, and the skull was mounted on top, and someone who went to use the shuttle restroom got quite the surprise.
Wow. I mean, it's kind of weird and creepy, but also in the name of science, it's a good thing because we need to know more about radiation and solar radiation's effect on the human body during spaceflight. I just want to say that when you are looking things up about the shuttle program, say maybe reading about a certain mission on Wikipedia, And you get to a paragraph that says, "This mission marked the first flight of a 5-kilogram human skull." A lot of questions are raised. Like, wait, first flight? Yeah,
Yep.
fascinating.
That is landing photographs we're talking about. This was at Edwards. And there is a video, there's a couple of videos. I'll show the actual normal landing video, but then I'll show a slow motion version. And there's a reason
What a
for
shot.
it.
What a
That is-
shot.
That gives you a sense of scale. There's a crew underneath the wing, and you can see just the size of the orbiter from there. So you go back to the shot of the transition from the transfer rail to the high bay, and it looks like a tiny little dinky shuttle. No, they're very big. The VAB is just huge. Martin, another one of landing. Another one of landing. What a surprise. All landing photographs. Hey! I got another one here coming up, which is really cool. Here's the one I was looking for. This shows you and they did modify them, by the way, in latter stages because they look quite old there. But they have the purge trucks and all the convoy, the shuttle landing convoy. And this was the West Coast version of it. They had the East Coast version, obviously, for KSC. And they had a one they could transport on trains to White Sands, which was only used once, STS-3. So that was one thing. But there's a NASA TV truck. They had a NASA TV truck because that's part of the convoy. I think that was their transmitter they had there because this is before the days of Starlink and all that business. But look at the old. I mean, we need EJ for this because he probably will name every single vehicle you can see there. But that is a real. I do love that shot. I mean, Jack, at Edwards, these old like sand kind of like runways. I know they've got a concrete runway there as well now, but are there all these very long runways in the desert still there?
Yeah, it's part of the reason why Edwards is what it is and where it is, and why so much of aviation history and so much of aviation testing has taken place out in the deserts of the American Southwest, is because dry lake beds are just large, flat, obstructionless things, and if you encounter any issues, they're a good spot to land. At Edwards, they have the concrete runway. They always have, or at least for many, 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 many decades they have. But that runway also ends in a very large dry lake bed, Rogers Dry Lake. So for experimental craft, you can come in on the dry lake bed, you can come in on the concrete runway. If you are worried about needing extra space, you have extra space there. If you're flying something crazy like, I don't know, a flying brick with rocket engines on the back. So yeah, it's part of Edwards, and sometimes you land on the dirt, sometimes you land on the concrete. I think this particular shuttle mission is in that sort of time span where they were working on the brakes and where they were all Edwards landings before they switched back to KSC. So the fact that they landed on the dirt and not the concrete in this case might have been related to that, but I don't actually know that.
You mentioned the brakes. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Sawyer, control yourself. So we do have a really cool video to show it. I mean, first of all, here's the landing as it was watched on TV by all the shuttle fans on there. Probably 4-channel TVs at the time because it's really. Although Americans got cable way before us. We were on 4 channels in the UK until the late 80s. I mean, that's when we didn't get. We always sighed because Americans had like 200 channels, and we're all like, oh, we're so jealous. I digress.
Yeah, CNN would cover these.
Right then, video time.
Crazy approach angle.
Altitude 1,100 feet now, range about 1.5 nautical miles. Gears down and locked on Columbia. Main gear touchdown. And nose gear touchdown for Columbia as she rolls out on runway 17 left at Edwards Air Force Base.
Wow, you can really see the air brake doing its thing.
The mechanical systems officer in Mission Control reports good braking on Columbia as she rolls to a stop at a mission elapsed time of 5 days, 1 hour, 0 minutes.
Right, two things. One, did you notice a NASA official NASA commentator was calling her a she? I still to this day get people saying you can't call them she's, call it it. That's just a nautical tradition of calling a ship a she. Don't get carried away. But notice how NASA were always saying it. They won't say it these days, unfortunately. But the other thing being, Jack. Hang on, let's scroll back. Scroll back, scroll back, scroll back. Ooh, there's a big plane. I know you like your planes. Can you work out what that is? That's probably a bit sort of like hard to
That
really take out, but
that looks like a B-52. I can't really
I was gonna
tell.
say that.
It's like 5 pixels, but that looks like a B-52 if I had to
Yeah.
guess.
I thought it was a big bomber as well when I was looking at it when I was recording the video for this, and I thought, oh, it is. Now Sawyer. The other thing here, right, is let's go back to here. Did anybody notice it seemed to take quite a long time to actually get her feet down?
Yup.
Right, we've got a
And
slow motion video, but
came very
yeah,
close to a tail strike too.
yeah. Maybe you'd like to explain why that was different to what we normally see, Sawyer, and then I'll show the slow motion video afterwards.
Sure. So, like we were kind of talking, like Jack was talking about, one of the big things they were working on was the brakes. One of the main improvements they made when they upgraded was the brakes. But there was a weird glitch in the system that, for some reason, if you touch down too hard, the small sensors in the landing gear that activate would switch from controlling with the rudders to controlling with the nose gear before the nose gear even touches the ground. So you would lose all of your steering control. It's basically these little switches that once the weight is down on them, that's when it tells the computer, okay, main gear touchdown. Kind of similar to the system used to auto deploy spoilers on an airplane. So once they did that, they couldn't modify the software until after landing. So they told the commander, land softly. Wade Hale's blog talks about how they gave them the warnings all the way up until the morning of land softly. So he tried to hold off as long as possible to create as gentle of a touchdown rate. In doing so, almost did a tail strike, as we mentioned, and now holds the record for the slowest touchdown ever of a space shuttle by a lot. The shuttle touched down at 154 knots. For reference, stall speed was 149 knots. It was 5 knots away from slamming into the ground and stalling out, which was extremely dangerous. And yeah, needless to say, they've gone for faster, harder landings after that. We're talking about 30 knots from the second slowest.
We're exaggerating this. Watch this video. This is a slow motion version of the landing, and just watch how long she hangs in the air. It's bonkers. You ready for this? Here we go. In fact, there's no sound here, so I can keep talking. Right? So this part here is okay. That's really cool, but wait till you get the kind of the angle where it's adjacent to the camera. You can just see how long she hangs in the air. It's bonkers for what is a flying brick. These things are not gliders. You know, I mean, they are gliders, but they're heavy gliders. And you're thinking, how on earth? But the flappy things on the back, Jack, elevons?
Yes.
Thank you. The flappy things on the back, watch them. You can see in the slow motion, they're really holding off, holding off, holding off. Wait for this side-on view here.
Wow.
Yeah, and the nose keeps pitching up this whole time, by the way. Notice that.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be pitched that high. Fair warning.
You see it better when the camera just keeps going to the left, to the right a bit more. Here we go. That angle is crazy.
Absolutely. What a beautiful shot.
There we go.
You can see him wiggling there, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen some bad landings where they land a little bit short, they land a little bit hard, the brakes catch fire, but this was, as beautiful as it looks, also one of the worst landings in space shuttle history because of the risk that it put to the orbiter.
There's no go around.
Yeah, you only get one.
Yeah. That's the thing with these landings. There's no go around. It's no like, oh, that didn't look very good. It could have gone around and tried again. Nope. You get one chance at this, and that's it. It's actually incredible they had no major incidents during landing because, oops, sorry, I
Yeah,
was
that
getting
is
so carried away by watching that. I completely
Yeah.
stopped to pause at the end.
that is 100% a B-52, by the way. Upon further watching.
There we go. Very good. Right, let's put back to the title screen because we've come to the end of the show. I was going to take a few more questions because we've come to the end of the show, but I don't want to leave people leaving the questions. RC Horseman is a good one relevant to that. When did they start using parachutes to slow the shuttle down, Sawyer?
That was a little bit later on. I'm trying to remember exactly which mission it was. I believe the Best Space Shuttle Endeavour was one of the first ones to test it, I think. But yeah, they added the drogue chute later on to try and help slow them down and ease the stress on all of the brakes. Because, again, they wanted to try and use the brakes for multiple missions as a way to try and cut down on turnaround time. But it was still a couple years away from actually going into service.
Resize that thumbnail because we're cutting off a few words. Severin, related to what we're looking at right there with the SRBs firing, asks why can't they just jettison the SRBs until they're done burning? So what would happen if the SRBs were jettisoned before they'd gone to the end of their burn, Sawyer? What would be the detriment to that?
The fact that they're still going to keep flying. They're still on, they're still going to go forward, and there's a strong chance that they will crash right back into the orbiter or the external tank or something like that when it happens because, again, it's completely uncontrolled at that point. Where they go is wherever they go, and that could be directly back into you. And while it looks like they're still burning at when they do separate from the shuttle and they do continue upward further just because of momentum, like we see with Falcon, they're basically done. It's kind of just residual sputtering.
It's sad, but if you go back and watch the Challenger disaster, you can see the SRBs flying off all different directions. That's when they were still burning, but they were obviously without the stack and they were uncontrolled. So that was a good example of what would happen if they came off before the end of their burn and not jettisoned properly. So yeah, that's not something you want to happen at all. Okay, end of the shuttle show. Let me first of all thank Jay in the background for making sure this all worked very smoothly, which it has. Producing this show, the Shuttle Sunday show, which will be on the channel itself as a recorded video in a not too distant future, so we can all go back. We've got an actual collection from the start where you can go back and look at all the videos we've done so far. This is the 30th mission. We've got more to come, obviously. And thank you to Sawyer. Thank you, Sawyer.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. It's one of those where you see a DoD mission, you're like, we're probably not going to get a lot of good info out of this. Oh, this mission had a lot of good stuff. So thank you, everyone, for sticking around, and alas, poor York.
Thank you to Jack as well. Thank you, Jack. Thanks, Jack.
You're welcome.
You're-
I'm talking while muted.
Talking while muted. Yeah, you're welcome. Always enjoy the DoD shuttle missions. Always enjoy Shuttle Sunday. We'll see you guys in the next one.
There we go. So until the next one, obviously we do it every Sunday, otherwise it'd be crazy. But we do it as many Sundays as possible. We've got a free Sunday, so we'll keep this show going and through the next missions because we're getting some very exciting ones in the not too distant future. This was actually a surprisingly long one for what was meant to be a very secretive mission. So you can imagine what it's like when we get to the more publicized ones, such as the Hubble deployment, which is not too far away now. So until then, thanks for joining us and goodbye.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
RS-28 chamber pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside, STS off. Bring in, STS off. It's orange!
R25! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
Look at this!
Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. Keep red. We don't need any more of these.